And then when you look at the project cost, the planned versus actual, you have kind of a similar story. Obviously, and probably not surprisingly, actual costs tend to run higher than planned costs. But you can see that if we just look at actual costs, SAP and Oracle tend to be the highest cost solutions, followed by Infor, which is fairly close, and then Dynamics tends to be implemented at a lower cost than the other three. And then, so looking at the green to start, the lime green, those are the actual costs, and then the blue is what the planned costs were. And you can see that Oracle has the biggest delta there between their planned versus actual. And we've seen that with our client base as well. There tends to be, I don't know if it's because Oracle is a very aggressive sales organization, and their VARs are too, or if it's because, I'm not sure what it is, but there is a big gap there, and we have seen that with our clients as well, that there is a fairly significant gap between actual and planned costs when it comes to Oracle implementations, more so than when you look at SAP, Dynamics, or Infor. And again, when you look at predictability, the most predictable cost is with Infor. So Infor had the most predictable implementation duration. They also have the most predictable implementation costs. And sometimes predictability is just as, if not more important than the actual cost itself. A lot of times organizations will be okay paying a little bit extra if they at least know that cost is predictable, and know that they're not looking at potential budget overruns or having to cut corners because they haven't allocated the right amount of money or resources to the project. So I think that tells a story there. And one other thing I'll mention too is these are all based on raw dollars. So you'll see on the left side, you can see what those raw dollar figures are. They kind of hover between $1.5 million and $2.5 million of total cost of ownership for these various implementations. Keep in mind those are average numbers, which averages are good to kind of compare the four vendors, but averages aren't always good when you look at you as an individual organization and try and figure out what your expected cost might be, because chances are you're probably an organization that's a lot bigger or a lot smaller than the average in the sample size that we looked at. So you really have to take some of this with a grain of salt. It's useful to compare the different vendors, but at the end of the day, it really depends on your company size, complexity, number of locations, number of users, all that stuff that drives cost more than anything. The other thing too is we actually look at some of this data not in terms of just raw dollars, but also in terms of cost expressed as a percentage of revenue, just as a way to normalize the fact that some vendors might have a higher representation of smaller organizations in their implementations, and others might have a larger representation of big companies. And we found that there's actually a very similar pattern in when we compare it as expressed as a percentage of revenue. So in other words, if we were to say, instead of looking at raw dollars, let's look at the average implementation cost expressed as a percentage of the company's annual revenue, the company that's implementing the solution, we find a very similar pattern when we compare the four vendors. So you can kind of set that aside. If some people may look at this and say, well, SAP and Oracle are going to be more expensive because it's mostly large organizations that implementing the solutions. That's not as true as it used to be, partly because Microsoft Dynamics and Infor have their fair share of large organizations as well, contrary to popular belief. But also, even when you do normalize company size and related to implementation cost, we still see the same pattern when we compare the four vendors.